Alright, as you can see, I've got my stab center in. We'll start with a block of wood. I just bring it up to where my tailstock is about even. I go in and I look at my wood, comparing here to here, looking for center. Kind of crank it in there just a little bit, and then move each end to where it looks like I'm centered both directions. And once I get to that, we tighten the tailstock down and lock it in place. Bring our tool rest up, make sure we're clearing. Now we can use a roughing gouge, and that's a real deep fluted gouge, and we can or we can pull it. But at times, rather than the roughing gouge, I like to use the large skew also to do this. We get the tool rest back up there a little bit closer, and maybe a little bit higher, get it about centered. And then with the large skew, we will need to make sure that we're following the bevel here, right in the bevel. As you notice, we're riding this bevel and we're cutting about down here on this bottom third. Let's go back this way. You can see where that cut's going. Alright, we're pretty round now. We've got some knot in there. That's not a big deal. Alright, now we need to put our tenon on here. The thing we need to think about as we put this tenon on is we want the face of the wood to butt up against this, but we don't want the tenon to butt out in the bottom of the joint. So really our tenon needs to be from here to, we'll say, about here. So that's the thickness or the width. This is the width of the tenon that we're going after. So we can start in here with a parting tool and make our tenon. Alright, one of the first things I like to do when making the tenon is square off the end of the block. And that way that is what's going to sit down in here. Alright, then we can just start in and make our tenon. Bring our tool out. And that's what I consider about the right size tenon. Now as you notice the size of my jaws here, they're just about closed. They aren't clear out, they aren't clear in. And my tenon is about the same size as the jaws now. So that means this opening is going to be just a little bit more. There's a lot of controversy going on how to make tenons, whether the jaws should be clear closed or clear open. We can kind of cover that, but I usually just go for a nice size. We hear a lot about tenon size and fitting the jaws. Alright, is what we're looking at on the standard jaws, like the Barracuda, that are just rounded on the inside. Okay, when the four jaws go together, we end up with this round. Okay, when we get a larger tenon like this, that those jaws are going to be open, is what they look at is that it's only going to hit here and here, and the center is going to be open. So they're saying that we've got four jaws, so we only have 8 contact points that are going to hold that. If we get down to a smaller tenon that's more the size of the closed jaws, we can decrease this gap in here. Now, we look at these and they are rounded. Then we look at a one-way chuck and we can see that we've actually got a hump here and a hump here. Alright, the thing on the one-way chuck with the two humps is when we do get on this larger tenon, we are actually hitting in this area and in this area. And so we're getting more surface area on the wood, even with the larger tenon, than when we use this chuck and we only hit out here and have the big gap in the center. And as you can see, if we go from the smaller tenon up to the larger tenon, that gap gets bigger and bigger. So when we think of the four-jaw chuck being closed, our tenon should be sized more like here, that is close to the size of the four-jaw chuck, that when we're out here we don't have a lot of gap in between each jaw, and that will give us the closer fit, being not having this little gap in the side. When we make a tenon, we need the jaw to fit on this face. That helps give strength to the hold of the chuck. We need extra space in here. We don't want this clear down in here like that, bottom out against the end of the chuck, and then space out here. And as I cut my tenons on my big one, see, I left plenty of space. It's better to have more space than not enough. Even my tenon on the other end. And see, here is the reason why we kind of face that off. As you can see, I left a little bit of a dome in it, but I've still got room in here not bottoming out in the chuck, because the chuck has to fit tight on this face. Alright, as you can see, we can get many different styles of chucks. This is what they call the number 4 jaw, and it's a large jaw. This they call more of the pin jaw and stuff. This will close in, and I can actually clamp a toothpick in this jaw. It'll close in so tight. This is more of a pin jaw. It's serrated on the outside so that you can do a holding on the inside of a vessel. And this is more of the standard number 2 jaw, and that's the one I normally use. And that fits a tenon, like we say, about that size. On most of my bowls, I go with a larger tenon, and that'll fit the number 2 jaws. And even on the smaller bowls, I still put about the same size tenon to fit the number 2 jaws. The big thing is that we keep the tenon shallow enough that we don't bottom out in the chuck. Now, on this bowl, as I've turned it before, we can see that I've used the one-way chuck, and we can see the doubles here where the 2 sets of jaws have hit and made that 2 grip factor versus the single half round where we just get out on the tips of that jaw. Any of the chucks will work. You know, if I'm using smaller wood like this, of course the tenon's smaller and the number 2 jaw won't go down that small, so that's where I go back and I use the pin jaw. Now, the pin jaw in this case is the Barracuda, and of course it's a lot deeper. I can still go out and get the jaws to hit on my rim there when I put that in, and I'm still not bottomed out in the chuck. Now, as you can see, this chuck goes all the way through, so actually I have back to this plate before I bottom out in this chuck, where many of the chucks, the bottom is clear down here, but I've actually got a chuck here. So now I've only got this distance to work with. And of course, see, that tenon would be too long for that chuck. That would not give me a good hold in that chuck. Where this tenon will go down, and as you can see, I still have my distance in here, but I am getting the lip on that tenon to go down in and fit on the face of the jaws. So we need that tenon short enough not to bottom out, not too long that we can't sit on this face.